Yesterday was a very significant and important day with the publication of the third National Strategy on Domestic, Sexual and Gender-Based Violence, and I want to thank the Minister and congratulate the Minister for her work in steering the Department towards that in its publication yesterday. It's an extremely far-reaching strategy, but I think its real strength is that it's been built on exceptional collaboration with the Government and the sector, the service providers in domestic violence, the NGOs representing women and men who have had such difficulties in their homes, in their workplaces, on our streets for many years. And this strategy and its implementation plan that goes with it is a real step forward by the state. And what's going to be important now is how we measure its implementation with all of the different departments. Education, children, equality, Department of Justice, but there's a very detailed implementation plan, and I want to take the opportunity to congratulate the Minister on it. Of course, the reason that we need this is well known, particularly over the COVID period. But one of the things that I've been doing this year with the facilitation of the Ceann Comhairle is to read into the Dáil record the names of the far too many women who have died at the extreme end of gender violence, that being femicide, and those 244 women over the last 25 years who have died in violent circumstances. Those women have been identified by Women's Aid, and if you don't mind, Las Ceann Comhairle, I'll take the opportunity to read out the names of those who died in July and in August over the last 25 years. And those are in July: Jamie Mohan Farrelly, Zhang Wang, Eileen Coyne, Bridget McFadden, Margaret Concannon, Carmel Marinan, Elizabeth Troy, Paige Machi, Shola Caney, Mary Slater, Linda Evans Christian, Catherine McInerney, Nicola Vonkova, Nora Kiley, Mary Quigley, Deirdre Jacob, Debbie Fox. And for those who died in August: Margaret O'Sullivan, Maura McKinney, Fiona Pender, Catherine Doyle, Margaret Murphy, Chantal Burgon, Carmel Coyne, Muka Mu, Lynette McKeown, Frances Ralph, Anne Walsh, Breda Ryan, Jean Gilbert, Eugenia Bratis, Elizabeth Duff, Jacqueline McDonough, Elaine O'Hara, Alexandra Sarenska, Carol McCauley, Clodagh Hall, Antoinette Corbally, Nasa Murray. And sometimes, Las Ceann Comhairle, when we're reading out names like that, it can seem like a list. It can seem a little prosaic. It can seem a little, but every single one of those was a woman who died in violent circumstances. Every single one of those is a woman who is missed by her family, by her friends. We have had, I have had women, friends and family contact me since to acknowledge, not to thank, but just to acknowledge their remembrance in the Dáil. And it is the reason that this government and the Minister has been working so hard towards this strategy and towards developing a culture of zero tolerance. And of course, it's not just femicide, it's everything that gets to that point. It's every measure of harassment. It's every entry-level aggression. It's all of the things that contribute to making women feel unsafe. It's all of the things that make all of the women here and in the Oireachtas building and outside act differently to the male experience going home at night, whether it's on public transport, whether it's in their workplace, all of the things that they've had to put up with, which at the very extreme end, of course, at the very extreme end, can result in what I've described here. But this strategy paves a way, I think, to helping reach that real seriously cultural change that will underpin, I hope, for the next 25 years, for the next generation, a different experience to the one that's gone before.
Las Ceann Comhairle, and thank you to Deputy Karen McNeill for raising this issue. And in particular, I want to thank you for the way in which you have remembered and acknowledged each and every one of those women, as you have rightly said, who have died in such violent ways over the last number of years. And it is and was their memories and that of their families and friends, and there's so many other women who have been victims of domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. That was at the forefront, I think, of all of our minds yesterday, but also over the last 18 months to 2 years as this strategy has been developed and launched. I think what is different about this strategy is that we have worked in a real spirit of collaboration. We have worked very closely with Safe Ireland, with the National Women's Council, my own department, but with every department across government to make sure that the strategy that we produced, that it is a whole of government strategy, that it is a strategy that works very closely with those who are on the front line, who are working with women and men and children day in, day out, but above all that we as a government come together to make sure that this is a priority for us. It is a €363 million strategy. It is built on the 4 pillars of the Istanbul Convention: prevention, protection, prosecution and policy coordination. But above all, it has set a very ambitious target, and that is zero tolerance for any kind of domestic, sexual and gender-based violence, and indeed the attitudes that underpin it. And I've been asked many times, what do we mean when we say zero tolerance? And it really is, it's about changing attitudes, it's about changing perceptions, it's about changing how we deal with domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. For all of us, it's about changing hearts and minds. And for me, to paint a picture, it's about not accepting violence, abuse, sexual abuse, any type of abuse, financial or otherwise, simply because it happens in a family unit behind closed doors. It's about all of us, and we've all been guilty of it, of laughing off comments, of saying it's only a joke, of just walking away from someone where they're pestering you and just saying, we'll leave them to us. But it's also about getting back to the basics, and I've said this, and I think we all agree at this stage, we can't simply say that we shouldn't talk to younger children about these issues because they wouldn't understand. Younger children are coming into contact more and more with these issues, and it's really important from a primary school age right up to secondary school and beyond that we're talking to young children about relationships, what a healthy relationship is, what an unhealthy relationship is, as they get older, what sexual relationships and healthy sexual relationships should be like. So what we've tried to do in this strategy, under all of the pillars, under all of the 144 actions, and there's quite a lot of actions, is focus on education, focus on raising awareness as we need to of all of these issues, focus on how we can protect survivors better. So there's a very clear commitment to double the number of refuge spaces and accommodation that we currently have. It's not enough. We have 141. It's simply not enough. We are pledging and promising in this strategy to double that number and to go beyond that, obviously, beyond this strategy. But it's important that we get the structure right, and again, in order to do that, we will be working very closely with the sector and making sure that the resources that are put in place, that they are specific to the needs of the women, of the children, and indeed we need to make sure that there are spaces available for men too, because we know that this issue predominantly impacts women but also impacts men. From a justice point of view, and as Justice Minister, it is about being tough on perpetrators. It is about making sure that if you commit this crime, that there is a penalty and there is a sentence at the end of it, while of course trying to make sure that you reform, that you rehabilitate, and that we have perpetrator programmes as well. And the final piece of the puzzle around the policy coordination. This strategy has a very clear implementation plan. It has dates, it has timelines, it has actions. It allows us to make sure that we are doing the work that we have said we would do. But for the first time, under the auspice of an agency, it will now put on a statutory footing a single agency that will have sole responsibility for domestic, sexual, gender-based violence, for delivering those services, for improving our standards, and from bringing all of us together to make sure that we implement this plan and that ultimately we change the behaviours that we're trying to change.
Deputy Karen.
Thank you, Laskin Corla. And I think that implementation plan is so crucial. And of course, members of government, parties, members of the opposition, and the sector will, rightly hold the department and the agency to account on that. And it's, it shows a clear commitment to set out exactly quarter by quarter what's intended to be delivered by each department. And it's the only way of ensuring implementation on a cross-government basis. But I think what you've said about education and the relationship and sexual education programme is so important. It's core to this. I would also suggest that family law reform is central to this. So many different people I've spoken to who are experiencing ongoing controlling behaviours through the court processes. It is, it is really one of the ultimate abuses to use the processes of the state against a partner or former partner to continue to exert control. It's one of the first things I spoke about in the Dáil, and it goes on, and it's a core part of this strategy. The victim experience in court, which we have improved so much but have more to do. But I think actually the real experience is before you get to court. It is that sense, as you've said, Minister, about being believed. And that being believed is one side of the coin. And as you said, we have all, including me, including many people, laughed off comments, laughed off experiences. But the only reason that we did that was because the alternative was that, really you either weren't going to get a hearing, you weren't going to be believed, or you weren't going to be taken seriously. It's simply easier to laugh off these things. That's why the zero tolerance approach is so important. The video yesterday that was shown at the launch I thought was exceptional, and I hope that it's pushed out more broadly, because I think it really speaks to that experience, the inappropriate hand on the shoulder, the inappropriate hand on the lower back, how that makes a person feel, how that makes them feel smaller. and how difficult it is for a woman in that context to step away, to turn away, to say something, to try not to disrupt the dynamic that's going on around her, despite it not being in any way her fault. It's all of those small things. And we have learned so much about that. I hope everybody has learned so much about that over the last 2 years, and we have so much more to do. And I hope perhaps that video can get a broader, a much broader hearing. And I know that there's funding in the package to try to do exactly that public awareness piece.
Minister, to conclude.
On that last point, there is funding available and will be part of the strategy to make sure that we do get the message across. And I think it's really important that we communicate what we are doing. It will then be a role of the agency as well to work very closely with the sector in the same way we have the Still Here campaign, the raising awareness of the supports that are available, but just making it, I suppose, part of people's day-to-day thinking that this is an issue that we need to respond to and that we shouldn't tolerate for any longer. In terms of education, the focus obviously on our children is really important, but also education of our frontline professionals. So as you say, when a person takes that step to come forward, even before they're thinking about court, the first person they talk to, be it a healthcare professional, be it a member from Garda Síochána, be it a counsellor, they need to make sure that they are trained and that they are understanding of what trauma a person may have gone through. So there's a huge focus in supporting a victim's journey that has now translated and expanded in this strategy to make sure that it's not just the member from Garda Síochána or the legal profession, but that it goes even further, and that also we have very clear understanding of what a child goes through, what a person who might be from a Roma background, from a traveller background, someone who has been sexually exploited, so that we have a very clear understanding, someone from the LGBTI plus community, that we can respond to their needs. In terms of family law reform, what this strategy does is work with a number of different strands that are happening in my department, but across many other departments. So I mentioned supporting a victim's journey, the family law reform, the family court bill, which will be brought before the Cabinet before the summer term, and the family justice strategy, which will accompany that. There's a very clear need to make sure that the intersectionality between a civil case and a criminal case, where so often, as you say, that abuse continues into the civil courts, that there is a way in which we can prevent that abuse from continuing, but also again that our legal professionals and others are trained to understand and to know that abuse, that our judges in particular are trained to understand that abuse, and that's why it's so important that we have our family courts that are specific to family cases, that our judges are trained in these type of issues, and we're going even beyond that in this strategy to look at whether we would have specifically trained judges for domestic, sexual and gender-based violence as well. So again, thank you for raising this issue, and I look forward to working with the Deputy and others in this House on it.